Some more of the old heads in the WNBA who still can't seem to get with it and continue to just spread negativity across the league and also seem to never be happy about anything.
A few days back, WNBA players and the so-called authorities went after Caitlin Clark with the most absurd accusations ever. But I'm happy this time they got hit by instant karma because they had the audacity to call Clark the biggest trash talker in WNBA history. Like, really? Are we watching the same Caitlin Clark here?
There can be women who are older than you, better than you on your team, but if they see that you are a young star and you're doing really well, they will do whatever they can do to sabotage your success.
She was dead silent, even when Angel Reese nearly dislocated her arm, or Dejanay Carrington poked her eye brutally. Clark didn't even open her mouth to defend herself through any of that, but now they're acting like she's out here trash-talking left and right.
This is the kind of reputation that the WNBA starts to get, because there was also a stat that came out a few weeks ago that said Caitlin Clark received 17% of the WNBA's flagrant fouls this season, and 80% of those flagrant fouls were committed by the Chicago Sky against Caitlin Clark.
The whole thing was just ridiculous, but this time, Clark had enough and actually stood her ground. Because let's be honest, if she hadn't, these people would keep trying to twist the story, slap on labels, and silence her however they could.
When Caitlin Clark came into this league, that was the free promotion for the entire league. And I'm sorry, the product has something to do with it. Caitlin Clark is the most exciting women's basketball player that we have ever seen. Caitlin Clark has bridged the gap from the hardcore basketball fans who have been watching the WNBA for years.
So the whole drama started with a jaw-dropping article that surfaced with the headlines, where WNBA players were throwing out accusations on Caitlin Clark that she is the most ridiculous trash talker they've ever seen.
Yet we have a player like Caitlin Clark who comes around, who shoots three-pointers further back than Steph Curry, and she's been doing it for 4 years in college. That is a product. That is a product that she brought to the WNBA that is all of a sudden exciting for many people.
Seriously? Clark? The same Caitlin Clark who's made a name for herself by not engaging in all that on-court chatter? For anyone who's followed her career, this claim feels like it was pulled out of thin air. It's a wild stretch, especially considering how she handles herself when things get tough on the court.
I don't understand why people can't just acknowledge that. What does it hurt for you to acknowledge that this woman has changed the game, is one of the most famous athletes in the entire world, has given you free promotion that supposedly is all you needed, right?
Let's break down how absurd this is. Clark is fiercely competitive, sure, but she's not out there running her mouth. She's the player who stays dead focused, even when chaos unfolds. And chaos has unfolded plenty of times. There's a mountain of evidence showing she's about basketball, not trash talk. Yet here we are, watching some players desperately try to turn her into the league's ultimate villain.
All the news surrounding Caitlin Clark and all of the dirty plays and hard fouls being committed on her, but I feel like it's gotten pretty absurd, and it's honestly downright embarrassing to see how the WNBA and the media coverage of the WNBA is playing out.
So, you want to talk about how brutal things have gotten for Caitlin Clark? Think of June 12th, 2024, critical playoff game, high stakes, and Caitlin Clark finds herself smack in the middle of a nightmare scenario. Dejanay Carrington, one of the league's toughest from the Connecticut Sun, goes in and strikes Clark right in the eye.
WNBA Twitter is currently crashing out over Black Eye Gate. I'm sure we've seen by now this play where Dejanay Carrington pokes Caitlin Clark in the eye. And after seeing this angle, so many people are saying that it was intentional. Right? Dejanay goes up to steal the ball, and when she comes down, her hand goes like this, straight into Caitlin's eye. Do I think that this was a reckless play? Yes. Do I think that she did it with the intent to hurt Caitlin Clark? No. Do I think it should have been called a foul or a flagrant one? Yes. But what I'm having a hard time understanding is how people think that this could be premeditated in a game. Like, Dejanay would have to be on some next level serial killer type of agenda to be able to accurately poke Caitlin the way that she did during that play. She went for the steal, comes down like this, and she's looking away at the same time. I know this is heightened because Dejanay has said things on her Twitter about the fever, and she's thrown little jabs toward Caitlin, but we are overreacting on this specific play. Her and Caitlin both said that it was just a basketball play, and yes, the refs missed this call, but let's not make it anything bigger.
And we're not talking about a love tap or a casual bump. This was a full-on hit that left Clark seeing stars. the kind of blow that would have most players sprawled out on the floor, but Clark? Half blind and struggling to focus, she stayed in the game. This wasn't just any game either. It was the result of a season where Clark had given every ounce of herself to get her team there, only to be met with this cheap shot.
Caitlin Clark is the reason that a lot of these new fans are watching the WNBA. And anybody saying, oh, it's the rookie class, no, it's not. It's Caitlin Clark.
And what happened next? Oh, you'll love this. Despite Clark clearly wincing, clutching her face, and visibly in pain, the referees looked the other way. No foul call, no whistle, not even a second glance. It was like the whole thing happened in a parallel universe, only Clark and her fans were witnessing. So there she was, trying to make sense of a game she could barely see, while the refs acted like she was imagining the whole ordeal. You'd think a blatant hit like that would at least warrant some protection, right? Wrong. Clark was left to tough it out, which, let's be honest, she did, because that's just who she is.
I was slow to make that judgment that every player in the WNBA is jealous of Caitlin Clark. But after seeing what we've been seeing over the past days, weeks, and months, I changed my mind about that. And at this point, I'm not even just embarrassed of the way that the WNBA is acting toward their new superstar who has opened so many doors for so many of these girls.
And even then, she kept her mouth shut. No protests, no public meltdowns. She played on with the same determination that defines her. But for her supporters, watching her handle these moments with grace only makes it worse. How is it that someone so focused, so committed to the game, keeps getting brushed aside when it counts? It's infuriating, and it just adds to the growing frustration of seeing Clark repeatedly ignored by those who are supposed to enforce the rules.
I'm also embarrassed of just us women. I know from personal experience, the better that you get, the more hate, jealousy, pettiness will come your way. And a lot of times it comes from other women being insecure in themselves.
The double standards in the WNBA are so glaring, they might as well be neon signs. Take Aja Wilson, for example. Just last month, she got a foul call after what looked like a gentle breeze from Nneka Ogwumike. Meanwhile, Clark can get half her face rearranged and the refs? Crickets. It's mind-boggling, and Clark's fans have had enough. They're tired of watching her put her body on the line, only to be left hanging by officials who seemingly couldn't care less. This incident with Carrington was just the latest slap in the face, and Clark's fans are over it.
I'm sure you guys have seen the viral clips of the dirty plays and hard fouls being committed against Caitlin Clark. We have seen players on opposing teams celebrating when Caitlin Clark gets thrown to the ground. We are seeing women just refuse to go to post-game media pressers because they don't want to talk about Caitlin Clark.
But if you think that was bad, rewind to March 29th, 2023. NCAA tournament, Clark facing off against Angel Reese. In what can only be described as an intense scuffle, Reese got so physical she nearly snapped Clark's arm in half. The aftermath? Clark tried to shake the pain out of her arm, visibly uncomfortable. But Reese? She shrugged it off, called it just a basketball play, as if nearly injuring someone is par for the course. Clark could have made a fuss, could have fired back with accusations, but she didn't. She took the high road, just like always, and the media, of course, had to make it worse.
The women in the WNBA, the old heads, the ones who are petty, the ones who are jealous, the ones who can't get on the new wave, is what is continuing to hold the league back.
Instead of calling out Reese's recklessness, they came for Clark, criticizing her for not being tough enough, or for her lack of emotional restraint, as if she was the problem. It's like we've entered some bizarre universe where Clark gets punished for being composed. The media's narrative was a joke at that time, and yet Clark keeps playing, keeps staying silent, and keeps getting treated unfairly.
They've fumbled Caitlin Clark in the worst way that they possibly could. They've handled the Caitlin Clark situation in the worst way that they possibly could. And I kind of agree with him.
And then poor Clark survived September 14th, 2024, when Alyssa Thomas, the powerhouse from the Connecticut Sun, dropped a bombshell accusing Caitlin Clark and her entire team of racism. Yup, she went there. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill sports beef. This was a serious, reputation-wrecking accusation that had everyone's jaw on the floor. And of course, media outlets wasted no time blowing it up into a full-blown circus.
But now a lot of people online are asking for the WNBA to review this play because as multiple angles have come out of this play, it seems like it might have been intentional.
And the funny thing was that there wasn't a shred of evidence to back up Thomas's claim. No videos, no quotes, no receipts. But that didn't stop the story from spreading like wildfire. It felt like a desperate attempt to throw dirt on someone whose only crime is being exceptionally good at basketball. Yet the damage was done. The media didn't care about little things like facts. They just needed something scandalous to sell. And Clark, the athlete who's built her entire career on pure dedication, got caught in the crossfire. And how did Caitlin Clark respond to this chaos? Silence. Not a word. While anyone else might have fired off a statement or gone on a social media rant, Clark did what she does best. She stayed laser-focused on the game. Her silent strength was louder than any rebuttal. No drama, no distractions, just basketball. It's a kind of grace that most athletes can't even fake, but for Clark, it's second nature. Even with her reputation being unfairly questioned, she didn't stoop to defend herself in public. She let her game speak, as always, and showed a maturity far beyond her years.
The WNBA needs to overhaul the referees that they have just been absolutely awful this season. I think DiJonai Carrington poked her in the eye on purpose. She was reckless when she was going for the steal. She didn't care where her hand landed.
Still, the smear left its mark. Even baseless accusations have a way of sticking, and this one cast a long shadow. Whispers followed her around, and side-eyes became part of the narrative. Clark, who's known for her relentless work ethic, suddenly had to deal with this extra, completely unearned burden. It's infuriating, really, having to carry the weight of someone else's baseless words. And yet, she powered through it all, never letting the nonsense knock her off her path. Her fans, though, they weren't about to let this go unanswered. They went into full-on defense mode, flooding social media with support. It was more than just backing their favorite player. It was a fight for her integrity. They called out the ridiculousness of Thomas's accusation and pointed out the glaring lack of evidence.
It's important that we point this out. One of the things that I brought up this morning in talking about Caitlin Clark is that some of the players, you want to use the word jealousy, fine. You want to use the word envy, fine. You want to use the word resentment. We want to play with words. That's cool. It's something. And I think that some of the ladies, not all, but some of the ladies in the WNBA are missing the point. And the point is, this girl right here is a box office attraction.
And if you think this was an isolated incident, think again. Clark faced absurd levels of scrutiny her whole career. Take the March 2024 game against the Las Vegas Aces. Kelsey Plum elbowed Clark so hard in the ribs that any other player might have lost their cool. But Clark? She took a second to catch her breath and got back to work. No retaliation, no drama, just focus. It's this unshakable poise that separates her from the rest. While other players might have thrown an elbow right back, Clark kept her head in the game, and that's what makes her one of the most respected players in women's basketball. So where does this trash talker reputation come from? Honestly, it's like someone had to invent something to criticize her for. Sure, she's got passion. Sure, she plays with fire. But mouthing off to opponents? Not really her thing. Her energy is channeled into making plays, not petty arguments. The evidence speaks for itself. Clark's all about winning, not talking.